Well, and you emphasize the importance of amplifying your value at the table through metrics, which I love that, right? We live in a kind of a numbers world. For women aspiring to executive roles in public relations, what are some of the key metrics that they should focus on to make a powerful case for their contributions?
Absolutely. Metrics should always be tied to the organizational goals. So, for women who are in PR, you have to be very mindful of what are the organizational goals. And then, where is the organization spending its resources, particularly its financial resources and its time resources? Those are the two most valuable. And so, if there is an advertising and marketing budget, if you are attending in-person events on behalf of the organization, then you need a return on that investment. But for your advertising and marketing budget, if you have websites or anything virtual, then you have the opportunity to look at that traffic and ensure that that traffic is meeting the needs of the investment. And so if you aren't tying into that traffic, the numbers, the people who are clicking, and then the conversion numbers, who's clicking, and then who's converting to your particular customer or client, and tie those into what your expected forecasted organizational goals are, then as a PR person, then you don't have anything solid to say that our PR and marketing efforts are contributing to the organizational goals. And so it's a ton of metrics that are associated with branding and marketing, but all of them funnel up to the organizational goals.
Absolutely. Does it get hard sometimes to demonstrate it to the C suite? Sometimes the metrics, I attend an event and there may not be any ROI for a year. And maybe it's someone I hear from as a result of attending that meeting. I don't know. Or maybe it just enriches our reputation and there's no seemingly direct ROI. Does it get hard to show it to the C suite sometimes?
Um, Not necessarily hard as long as you can explain. There are some metrics where you're going to have immediate result. Like if someone clicks on your website, you immediately can see that they clicked on your website. You may not be able to tie in the click on the website to the actual sale immediately, but you can see that they clicked on the website. And the example that you gave, sometimes we have to groom and cultivate a relationship with potential customers. And so they may come across us, or call it the honeymoon phase, where they may sit back and watch what your business does, watch the website, watch what you're branding, what you're offering, make sure that you're going to be around for a while because a lot of businesses go out of business.
Hmm.
And so they watch you for a while. And so you don't have any way to gauge that honeymoon phase until an actual hit and conversion and sale is made. And so to the C-suite, you can talk about the immediate return on investment, and then you talk about the grooming phase. But you have to be able to prove that there's some type of ongoing action between yourself and possible customers or clients, by way of some type of metrics to show that you're out there doing the work and that people are responding to that work. And then, of course, the end result is the sale. So not difficult to explain, but you have to talk about the different type of metrics. You have immediate metrics, and then you have delayed metrics, but they all funnel up into the organizational goals.
And I mean, take this podcast, for example. You reached out to me, not just for our podcast, but for a client of ours. You're going through that period where you're doing podcast interviews, enriching yourself as a leader, which I saw clearly in the email. But how do you even tie all in? That you and I are going to talk for 20-25 minutes. You've probably done a half hour of get ready for what this guy's going to ask me type of stuff. That's an hour of your time. How do you direct tie that hour of your time back to your organization's goals, of which you're the leader, but imagine for a second you weren't?
Well, if I wanted to directly tie it into, I did not know you prior to my reaching out to you. So you
That's
are
right.
at least one connection. And I subsequently made multiple connections because I also was on the other podcast. And so that is a direct metrics that is tied to my action. Others are not as clean as you mentioned. It may take a while. I may not even know that one of your listeners who are listening to me now may reach out to me a year from now, 6 months from now, or next month. I may not know that it's because of this podcast until they let me know. But I will ask, because I ask all of my clients, how did you hear about me? Because a lot of my business is from referral. And so I have to ask, how did you hear about me? And then when they say, I heard about you from stories and strategies, then that's how we can tie it immediately into in terms of those delayed metrics. So you have to ask the question, you have to compile the information, and you have to keep the data, and you have to make sure that the data is accurate and correct. The biggest part is collecting the data. A lot of entrepreneurs don't collect the data, and some people collect the data and then do nothing with it. But you have to be able to tie it to each other. And for me, tying it to each other is asking individuals, how did you hear about me? And then that way I can tie the investment with the subsequent client or customer relationship.
Expand for me on the different kinds of analytics that any aspiring leader, and in this case, we're talking about women, the different kinds of analytics. You mentioned impressions, you mentioned callbacks, anything that hits an expressed goal for the business. And how familiar should women become in analytics as they pursue those higher goals?
Very. Quantitative data has no emotion. And a lot of times, qualitative data, opinions that aren't based in fact, aren't based in data, have a little bit of emotion in it. And so when you really get down to those deep conversations about whether or not an organization should invest funds, at a certain point, people want to see critical and direct data that says that this is where we should direct our money or continue to direct our money. And so a lot of times quantitative data, those exact numbers, those exact reports, you have to collect it and you have to collect it right. There's different types of data, as you mentioned. A lot of companies collect data, but not everyone is putting the metrics into the system. So that's one issue, because now you only have half of your information into the system. It's only going to spit out data based on half of the information. Some of the systems are outdated. They aren't talking to one another. Again, now you have incomplete data. So some of the data that one needs to collect, they all tie into three different areas. You have your talent data, you have your processes data, meaning process efficiency, and then you have your systems data. Your talent data is, do you have the right people and the right jobs at the right time doing the right things? And you can base that on your productivity. And you tie that into what it is that you say that you were going to do based on the talent that you have on deck. And are they actually doing that? So those productivity reports that you may have depending on your particular industry. You have your process efficiency data that every leader should consider. Are we churning out whatever the product or the service is in the time that we said that we were going to churn it out? If so, great. How can we amplify that, accelerate that? If not, what are the barriers for us meeting our quarterly goals, our biannual goals, and our annual goals? And then you also have your system data. Are we using our systems to the full capacity that we expect it to? Is it doing what it is we hired it for a particular reason, and are we utilizing it for that? And so those three areas, processes, systems, and talent, is a slew of reports that one can manage and review on an ongoing basis to ensure that those three areas we are operating the way that we thought we will operate for this calendar year or this fiscal year.
See, I love that. And in my fantasy world, we live in a world of pure meritocracy, and the numbers can kind of explain it. We don't live in a world of meritocracy. So let me just ask you point blank. I believe it is harder for women in PR, where they are 2/3 of the workforce. I believe it's harder for women to get to the C-suite. And someone can challenge me if they want to. Why? Why is it harder in a field dominated by women in terms of overall participation for them to get to the C-suite? Simple question. I know the answer is horribly complex.
Correct. Complex because you don't know the particular barriers for any particular woman. And so I'm going to speak in very generalizations. Some barriers are self-imposed barriers. Again, not knowing our analytics, not being an expert at something, because experts are highly regarded in fields as opposed to generalists. not cultivating relationships up and down the chain and outside of the chain,
Mm-hmm.
with our, vendors and our customers. Everyone, as you become a leader, you're more vulnerable in terms of your vulnerability because you are not doing the work. And so you have to cultivate relationships with people up and down the chain, from your frontline employee to your vendors and possible vendors, because if one vendor fall off and you immediately need to pick up another vendor, then you should already have a relationship with the next vendor. And so those things are make it difficult because some women may focus on relationships, only relationships, which is fine, but now you're missing a piece of the puzzle in terms of you don't have that specialty that is needed for an organization to call on you when they're in trouble. Like when an organization wants to upgrade systems, then they call a system person. If they're having problems with finance, then the person that they hire or they tap into is the person who's an expert in finances. People do not tell individuals a lot of times what they need to do to convert from a manager to a leader. As a leader, I've been in senior leadership. I'm planning 3 to 5 years down the road. As a manager, I was concerned about what we were doing this week. If no one tells you what you need to focus on for leadership, how do you know that when it's time for you to go through that process that you need to even speak differently, look at things differently?
Mm-hmm.
My competitors are always going to be brick and mortar and online. We live in a world that is very online now. You can almost get anything online, and also you probably can get it the next day if you're in the product services. And so you need to be aware of who are your competitors, brick and mortar and online. Sometimes if women haven't talked to anyone, these are the things you need to consider. These are the things you need to focus on. We have barriers to our understanding of what leadership is. I myself, I had a 350-hour investment that helped me get to where I am. About 15 years ago, I wanted to move from middle management to senior leadership. I didn't know any women in senior leadership, but I had 3 succession bad bosses. I'm just going to say bad bosses. And I
Yep.
felt like I could do it differently, but I knew that I didn't know all I needed to know to start the process. So I went up on LinkedIn and did some research and looked for a woman leader who was a vice president, who looked like me, African American, who had been a vice president for at least 10 years, sent a copy of my resume along with a direct message, and this was 15 years ago, and asked her to be my mentor. She said yes for $350 an hour. Now, 15 years ago, I wasn't rolling like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't rolling like that. But what do you do when someone has walked the walk of your ultimate goal? And so I
Mm-hmm.
negotiated with her to for 1 hour a month for 1 year. $350 a month for 1 year. She helped me identify my unique selling proposition, which is my USP, which is what makes you different from everyone with the same title, similar education, and similar experience. Well, my unique selling proposition against my peers was that because I had worked in human resources, I can create a metrics from indirect revenue generating departments.
Yeah,
Because we
okay.
don't because we don't directly sell, it is hard to articulate our value at the table, that something that is quantifiable and validated. And I was able to do that because my career in HR. And so she was like, that is your golden juice there. And so she said, you need to be working with HR, IT, PR, marketing, all of those firms that don't indirectly sell. Help them create a formula that can be validated and repeated over and over and over again. When she helped me identify that, I worked with her for a year. I was invited to apply for a senior leadership position. And for the last 15 years, I've been in senior leadership based on just continually professionally developing myself. But I hired a mentor to fill in the gaps of what my understanding was in terms of moving from management to leadership. And a
Wh-
lot of women leaders don't do that. You have to invest in yourself.
Let me repeat that back in my own words because I think that's the golden juice, as you say it. First, understand yourself. understand your unique selling proposition. I would call it understand your personal niche.
Yes.
I think the riches are in the niches, right?
Yes. Yes.
And leverage that and work that with your relationships even, because some of the relationships you're going to have, it may be the same people as somebody else, but the relationships are different.
Yes.
So use that.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Last question. I've kind of always had a life approach myself that I'm not learning anything if I'm talking. But you make a really good counterpoint that I haven't heard quite expressed this way. Silence is not a superpower. So how do we self-advocate, and what are some common situations where women should speak up to position themselves as leaders?
Absolutely. So that phrase just rolled across my tongue about 10 years ago, just me being a leader of women managers who felt the need to be humble at the table, who felt the need to not recite their wins. How will people know your wins if they weren't standing there beside you, if you do not articulate your wins? And so helping these women leaders not redirect, but helping them to understand that it is not bragging to be able to articulate the value that you contribute to any organization. It is showing them the possibilities, and you can even add to it to next steps about what to do for the future, but it's showing them the possibilities of what we've done as an organization, what I've done as an individual. And so what better mouthpiece for that than you? Yeah, we can have sponsors and we can have ambassadors, but you fill in the gaps. We are in a wisdom economy now. And what I mean by that is because of AI, people can churn out a whole lot of data, but what they don't have is the wisdom of how to apply the data and what can happen. What if things doesn't work the way that the business plan churns out for AI? So it's the wisdom economy that is going to help people set themselves out from that. And so as women leaders, we need to be constantly articulating what are we doing to help contribute to organizational goals? Because believe it or not, people are so busy churning, they're not keeping up with your wins.
No.
It's up to you to keep putting it in the forefront and tying it into possible organizational goals that we should be doing that maybe we're not doing, or that are currently on deck for the 5-year plan. And so that's what I mean by silence is not your superpower. It is not bragging. I find that I work a lot with women leaders are too humble. And so if you tie it into organizational goals or what the organization should be doing, you are doing what you should be doing as a leader, which is you're helping the organization determine next steps for sustainability and competitiveness within their market.
Agreed. I think men are at least a bit more willing to proof of performance than women likely are. It's as a sweeping general statement. I agree with you.
Yes, and I've worked with some men. I know what they did in kindergarten.
Yeah,
because
I bet you did.
They share it. So
Yeah.
there's a fine line between that. But let's get in the middle. Let's not be on the extreme end of either one of those situations.
And read the room.
Yes.